What does the European Association do? In 1996-7, which is when I got into the Council of ERA, it was really surprising. We didn't know what we were supposed to be doing. If you're a member of a national association, everybody says, yes, of course, this is the Finnish association. This is Swedish, this is German, this is French. You say, well, what does a European association do? So the Swedish professor, a good friend of mine, who became the president, and I became the secretary general, and we would speak to each other, what are we supposed to be doing? What does a European do? It might seem stupid, but it's quite a good question in retrospect. And then a couple of years later, I was in a thematic network on teacher education, and some people acted like the colleague from Austria and the colleague from France. Oh, it's fine, it's a European project. And I was still going, what does a European project do? What does a European thematic network do? Who wants us to do something? So I had that as well. And then the bigger social science projects, what are we doing? And then the best, and my best ever research question is always, what is going on? Yeah. And sometimes to be naive is a good research skill. In my case, it's unavoidable. Okay, so basically, I'm going to give you a presentation that's based around some key themes. Everything that's is in here, more or less, is from texts that you were given as readings. I have not said which text they come from, actually, because it was irrelevant, because my text is what I speak now. But they're all in there, if you need them, if you use European. Okay, so, and it seems, I think, and this is maybe a kind of an ontological thing, that my approach was cultural to these questions. And that itself was a problem, because most of the people who were writing about Europe were not writing through a cultural perspective or a cultural political perspective, and they were not interdisciplinary. So that's all for that one. This seminar, this network, this association, I'm going to, the only way you can make Europeanization work for you, and if we didn't mention it before, you have now got to think about it, is this seminar part of a Europeanization project overall? European Union project. So don't leave it as something out there, or I don't use it in my PhD, or they don't mention this. I want you to think of what we are doing and say, and I'll give you the categories as I work through them. Is this a Europeanizing project? Okay? That's one of the first ways we've got to try and make this concept work. In Paulo's terms, this is definitely theorizing. It is not, in a sense, theory bound. It's theorizing. I feel that, not since I was young, have I had a theory that helped me explain most things. I don't have that anymore. What I have is a constant questioning and therefore a constant theorizing. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. Now, the first one, you should be able to get the number one cultural strategy. Thank you. Is when I started to read and find things to read about European, what is going on. By chance or opportunity, I found that the idea of a cultural strategy was quite important as a first step in European processes. They didn't use the word education. It was a politically fraught term. And even in recent years, a conservative people in England would say, why is the European Union talking about education? It's not their business. Subsidiarity. That's the national business, not their business. So in the early days, the European Union or the Commission would not go near education directly. Sometimes they would a little bit go into vocational education. But so what they did work with was a cultural strategy, the idea of Europe belonging to all of us. And therefore it wasn't a new idea of Europe, it was the old idea that everybody should know about Pompeii. It's just nearby. Everybody should know about the treasures of Paris. It was that sense of Europe being fixed, and it was smaller then, but also everything in it was to be shared. We should all know. And that would make us Europeans. It was actually, in a way, it was quite a simple model. If you knew about those things, you became a European, and that was their objective. Okay, so a cultural strategy. That European integration was associated with a European model of culture, which sometimes even, I think the last person I don't know, the French premier of a few years ago, he had a view like that, but he said, of course, but Europe is a Christian model of culture. That's who we are. But so people do. Berlusconi, I'm sure, said something like, "We have food in common." But there was something about a European model, and it was fixed. European identity fixed. It was the sum of all the national histories, an exceptional source of development, progress, and culture. And cultural cooperation then would create a new language, a European language, that we would share. And in fact, one of the first big programs was about making sure that museums could open themselves digitally to people of other countries. If it's got something in blue at the bottom, that's because that's one of the ways in that I had at the time, biographically, to try and get a grip on this. Because of this work I was doing in a thematic network on teacher education, we were involved with the early formation of something called the European School Net, or the European Net, or the School Net. Has anybody used that? No? Okay, well, it grew in ambition, but it was the first time ministers of education got together in a big room like this and said, what do we want? So it's a kind of a step. But I was in a room like this in Brussels and near the Rue de Loire, and there was a lot of computers and young people working on the computers, and they said, this is the European School Net. And I said, well, what is it? And then a very kind person at the end said, well, look at my screen, and this is what we do. On top of the screen was a ribbon that came moving across all the time, and he would say, a middle school in Lithuania wants to work with another school on a conservation project. And then immediately another one would be coming. We would like to work with another school in Italy on. So they were flashing across the top, and I thought, how interesting. So this is a kind of twinning projects, and then you could see that schools were creating clusters and consortium across borders. And at some point, in a sort of Gestalt moment, I thought, this is a common Europeanizing project that they were developing. Nobody said it was to make all schools work with all other schools, but the effect was to create very strong cross-border links between schools, direct links. And it still goes on, and they have a big twinning project stuff and everything. Okay, so that was one of my first ways of thinking about how was that old cultural strategy now turning into a way for schools and educationalists to work with each other, even though they weren't supposed to be part of a European Union policy, because they weren't supposed to be working with each other.